My name is Patricia Sanford, and I'm the director of the Maryland Archaeological Conservation Lab. And there are a lot of really great people that are involved with this project, and they're going to introduce themselves in a few minutes. First, I would like to thank Roxanne and Scott Strickland for bringing the snacks today. There's water and snacks over on the table by the window, so please feel free to help yourself to those. And a special thanks goes to Michael Kitt of the Calvert County NAACP and Chris Sperling, who is the Calvert County Preservation Planner, for helping to write support letters and support this grant project that we are working with today. So welcome everybody. What I would like to start this project. It has its roots back in the 1800s, but I want to start in 1930. In the early 1930s, when U.S. diplomat Jefferson Patterson purchased Peterson property to form his Point Farm property that today makes up the core of Jefferson Patterson Park and Museum. And if we fast forward into the early 1980s, Jefferson Patterson has died, and his widow gives the land that is Point Farm to the state of Maryland because of the archaeological resources that are located there on the park. There's 9,000 years of human history located at Jefferson Patterson Park and Museum along the river and along St. Leonard Creek. And in the early 2000s, Kirsty Unala worked with the Gross family descendants to do research and archaeology on Sue Keek's cabin. Sue Keek was a black woman who, with her family, lived in a house on the park property. She did wonderful work there, and recently park staff have discovered that there are a lot more of these Sue Keek type farm sites that are both on the park, public grounds, and on adjoining properties next to the park. And so we went out into the woods on the park, and you can still see these sites on the landscape, and we've got some photographs we're going to share with you today. And so we thought, well, we would really like to learn more about this Wallville community. It looks a lot different today than it did back after the Civil War and in the early 20th century. So we applied for a National Park Service Civil Rights Grant, and we were fortunate enough to get funded, and that kind of started this project. So right now, I would like to let the folks that are working on this project introduce themselves, and if any of the steering committee would like to say a couple of words, and then we're going to do a PowerPoint. We're going to do a PowerPoint that's going to take hopefully about half an hour, so we're going to try to go through that pretty quickly because we would like to give a lot of time for you guys to either ask questions or to talk about your memories of Wallville, and then we will kind of break up from sitting, walk around. We've got maps up here we'd like you to look at and help us mark with locations. We've got sign-up sheets for oral histories, and other kinds of information, and then we have a chart in the back that we're collecting names of Wallville families. All right. Let our folks introduce themselves.
A little bit taller, so I'll have to lean down a little bit. I'm Scott Strickland. I'm the Deputy Director of the Maryland Archaeological Conservation Lab. And I'm just very happy to be here to work on this project.
Hi, I'm Lauren Canty. I'm the collections technician at Jefferson Patterson Park and Museum. My connection to this project is I am part of a different grant that will be creating an exhibition, and we have a whole room dedicated to Wallville. So I'm excited to see the research that comes of this National Park Service grant so we can convey to the public the importance of Wallville.
Hello, I'm Alice Glass, an archaeologist at Jefferson Patterson Park and Museum. I'll be helping with the good work and processing artifacts that we find during this project, as well as some of the research. It's great to see you all here. I'm so glad to hear everything you guys know about Wallville.
Hi, I'm Kirsty Ornila, and I am so happy to see you, that you've all come out this morning. I've excavated the site at Suki's Cabin site back in the 1990s. As many of you remember, I think Randy was a teenager when we were clearing that site for 2 years before we even started, and Daniel Brown brought his own chainsaw to help us clear the mess off of it. I know more about some of you all's family than I know about my own. So it's very special to me to have a role as a consultant on this project. I'm delighted to be here and look forward to learning more with you.
So these folks are the core of the project. I do want to point out some other Jeff Pat staff members who are here helping today. Alice Merkel in the back, who is doing the videotaping. Deborah Antanen, who is our Director of Education. And Jim House, who is the sound and video guy. So thank you guys all for staying. If any of you have information, any of these folks would be happy to talk with you about the project. I would like the steering committee to introduce themselves now. Y'all want to, did Andre, you want to go first? If y'all want to go in order, and if you want to say anything, we have a fabulous steering committee of Gross family descendants who are helping us with this project.
My name is Andre Brown. I am the grandson of Nellie Gross Brown and the great-grandson of Eliza Gross. So I'm just happy to be here to share, but mostly to learn as well.
Good morning. I'm Shelton Brown. My mother was Octavia Gross, my dad, Bernie Brown. I lived in Wallville from 1938 till 1950. During that time, it was a beautiful community. We walked everywhere. I walked to church, I walked to school, a public school there, 1 room, 7 grades. We had a church, Seventh Church, we went there. My aunt was a Sunday school teacher. So I grew up right in Wallville. I remember during World War II we had blackouts that turned into land side. The sirens went off, the airplanes in the sky, military maneuvers. So I experienced a little of Wallville during that period.
Thank you.
I'm the wife of Shelton Brown, so I assist.
Good morning. My name is Chester Gross. Father who goes back is to Eliza Gross, because I'm pretty sure most of you all know her. That was my grandmother, and one of her sons was Calvert Gross, and he was my father. He's married to Eveline Gross, and we were born and raised in Wallsville. I don't know what that's in or not. But anyway, our residence is located directly adjacent to which is now Jefferson Patterson Park Museum. And as some of you might know, that property is now owned by Jefferson Patterson Park Museum. We sold it, I'm not sure what year it was, in the early 2000s. And I am the youngest of the 6 children. And right now, there's only 2 of us left. It's myself and my sister, Elaine. And thank you very much.
great-grandmother. Chester's father was the brother of my grandmother, Evelyn Rose. And Evelyn would come up to Baltimore and get all 5 of her grandchildren and bring them down here every summer. We spent a lot of time with Mervyn and Renzo and all them, with the Parker family, with the Brown family. Uncle Daniel would put us in his truck, we'd go to school or something. And we've been over to Chester's house on Upper Lane, where we had a lot of years down here. Doing our summers down here, had some great time. And Aunt Nellie was my grandmother's sister. We go over Aunt Nellie's. Aunt Nellie lived a couple blocks from us, and we would go over her house after school. So a lot of great memories, Miss family. I'm so glad that we grew up the way we did in this family. Yeah, great memories.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Roxanne Parker. I am the daughter of Glenda Wallace, who is the daughter of Pauline Gross, and who is the daughter of Eliza. That's it.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Sheila Montague Parker. I was married to Mervyn Parker, who is the son of Annie Olivia Gross, who was the 10th child of Eliza and Everett Gross. And I just want to stress to each of you the importance of doing oral history, family history, talking to your children, telling your story. Because if you don't tell it, somebody else will, and it might not necessarily be the results of the information that you want to display. So please share your history, share your information, not only with Jefferson Patterson Park, but with your family, with your children. Thank you.
Scott and I are going to be playing a game of up and down with the microphone. All right. This is a map that shows Wallville. It's located along the Patuxent River, sort of south of St. Leonard and along St. Leonard Creek. And we're going to go through these slides pretty quickly. We can make this PowerPoint available to all of you all as well if you give us your email addresses. When we first started looking at this project, we were trying to figure out what defined Wallville. And so for the purposes of this project, we are defining it as everything kind of south of the Perrin Road intersection with Maple Road. But if any of you all feel differently and your understanding of where Wallville is different than this, we really want to hear what you have to say. But for right now, this is, for the purposes of this particular study, that's the definition that we are using. We've also got some maps from the 1800s that call this area Chittron Neck, Chittering Neck, or Chickering Neck. We're also interested in that name, if anybody knows anything about where all that came from. All right, for this particular project, we've got a NPS civil rights grant, but we have already put in another grant for funding. We realize this project is much bigger than what the Park Service funding will cover, so we've already put in for another grant, and then next year, this time, we're putting in for a third grant that we'll get to help expand this project more. So what we want to do is look at after the Civil War and into the early to mid 20th century for the history of this Wallville community. We want to look at not only the economic history but the social history, and we're going to look at some of the archaeological sites that we have found a little bit later this spring. We're using a wide variety of sources. We've gone to the archives in Annapolis. Have been to Calvert Marine Museum, so we're using oral histories, map evidence, photographs, tax assessment, land records, oral histories, talking to people like you all. So we're approaching this from a wide range of sources to try to get as much information as possible. And here's some of those sources. We've already been to the Calvert Marine Museum. They have incredible oral histories that talk about not only tobacco agriculture, but also oystering and other watering industries in Maryland. The JPPM or JPPM oral histories tend to focus more on the Wallville area and the park itself, so those have been very helpful as well. So these are some of the sources. If anybody else has different sources, we would like to hear about those as well.
So, as Tricia mentioned, part of this project also has archaeological work involved with it. And to begin with some of that archaeology, what we had done was we first started looking at things like maps and census records. So this first map that I'm showing you here, this is from 1848. This is a U.S. Coastal Survey map. And it shows a portion of Wallville, roughly where Jefferson Patterson Park is. And it shows it in pretty good detail. We found that trying to overlay this map on a modern map, you can get placements of these structures, which are shown as these little black dots. They're fairly accurate, pretty close to where they're supposed to be. So we use this as one data point for trying to identify where potential sites are. We have also other maps that go a little forward in time. This is from 1902. This is a soil survey map. And this map shows buildings along the west side of Maple Road, shown here and highlighted there. It shows them roughly in their locations. It's not as accurate in the placement as the 1848 map, but it gives you an idea that somewhere along that west side of Maple Road there were a lot of different houses. And who lived in those houses we find out from other records like census records. And I'd like to invite Alex to come up. And she's really dug into these census records and knows these better than I would.
All right, so these census records are extremely valuable for us in terms of interpretation, for identifying who's living in this community. These names that are circled here, you guys probably will recognize if you can, they're a little small. But they're Dare, Washington, Rawlings, Bannister, Chase, Gross. The names that are circled in red, we know these people lived in some of these structures. That row of houses that Scott just mentioned, based off of some of the deed records. And the Bannister and Chase as well have deed records. But these census records give us a different view of who's living there, because it's also including people who are renting, not just people who own the property deeds to these houses. The names in red are structures where we'll be doing some archaeological testing. And then the names in blue, we know through deep research, like I mentioned.
So Alex has also been going through and tracking down the deed records and doing kind of land title histories for all the different parcels along Maple Road, or at least around the park. And then I take what she's found and I try to plot out the descriptions of those land boundaries as they're described. So kind of give you a starting point. This is kind of the picture around Jefferson Patterson Park in 1886. And you can see the bounds of the Patterson property, which later became Jefferson Patterson Park. And then to the east of that, along Maple Road, was land that was owned by a guy named Isaac Bowen. And going forward in time, these transactions all happened at different times up through 1886 through 1933. Different parts were subdivided out. The first ones were these to the south for Everett Gross and Lina Gross, right along Dunker's Cove or Doncaster Cove, whichever name you go by. One of the clues we had for identifying, before we even started doing all that deed record research, was a 1926 plat of the Patterson farm, or a part of the Patterson farm. that had adjacent property owners next to it. And it's not just that these were tenants who were living on the Bowen property, but these were deed transactions that happened prior to this plat being recorded. And we used this as kind of a basis for trying to go out into the woods while we were writing this grant proposal to identify where these sites are. And so we did a little bit of legwork and did some field reconnaissance of some of these sites, using those historic maps to try to pinpoint where the house locations might be. And then we went gallivanting, walking through the woods, find some. And we came up with a plan for what we wanted to do as far as the archaeological work for this grant project. And the image on the left, it shows you our survey areas that we proposed for this project. And the map on the right shows you survey areas just outside the park property. So that property that's kind of highlighted there, that's not park property, but an adjacent landowner who we got permission to survey for. And kind of overlaying that 1926 plat with those list of names, we surmised that these houses that we saw on these historic aerial maps and other maps were probably associated with these people. So when we were going out there, we were calling them like the Alexander Gross site, the Elizabeth Rawlings site, and the Edward Rawlings site. And so going out there, here's a 1938 image of the Alex Gross site. And you can kind of see like rows of trees, you can see plantings and parts of the farm fields associated with that property. And we went out there and we were able to find it. We got a little bit turned around in the woods because it's the woods. But we used the GPS, we found the site. It was right where we thought it might be. We saw a fallen over chimney. We saw some other brick rubble and some pieces of metal roof sheeting. Moving south, we also found the Elizabeth Rawlings site. And it's located on top of this small hill along a driveway to a modern house. But it was, you could tell you were on the site because you saw like ceramics like this at the base of a tree. Some other artifacts that were scattered down the edge of that small slope of that hill. And then one kind of telltale sign of a lot of these tenant structures dating to the like 19th century or early 20th century is the presence of this fossil rock. And lastly, we have the Edward Rawlings site. And here you can see we had some ornamental plantings. So ornamental plantings are also kind of a clue to let you know that you're onto a house site. In addition to finding artifacts all over the ground, there was a lot of broken glass and pieces of ceramics. And then again, also some fossil rock mixed with some brick. I think also next to this we found an old iron bed frame. Here's another picture of that fossil rock. And we knew from some of the oral histories that we already had at the park that I think Kirsty might have done, that there was a path that connected tenant structures on the Peterson or Patterson farm with those house sites along Maple Road. And this road probably, or this path probably dated to at least the 18th century, and it appears on that 1848 map going across the wetlands at the head of Dunker's Cove. And this image here, this is a high-resolution LiDAR image. This is a type of topography. And here you can make out where that path was. Like, it's just a little bit higher along the wetlands there. And it connected the Suki's cabin site over towards the Edward Rawlings site. And down here at the bottom, this is the remnants of Suki's cabin. And that's all like fossil rock there. And I'd like to invite Kirsty up here to talk a little bit more about St. Luke's Church, which is located near the park entrance.
I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with St. Luke's Church. If not from your own experience, then certainly from hearing your parents talk about it. It later became merged with Brooks Church, which was already in existence by the time St. Luke's came into being. The property you can see, I'm not going to repeat what's written on the slide, but the church itself was built by Charles Spicknell around 1909, after that property was acquired. And there's more about that property that Scott has found through his research. Octavia Gross Brown talks a lot about having gone to Sunday school and singing in that church in her oral history that we did back in 1996, I think it was. And I'm sure that many of you others have similar stories that we hope that you will share with us. There's still a lot about the church history that we don't really know or understand. We know it had a relationship with other institutions, particularly a Knights of Pythias Lodge, which, thanks to Scott's research and Lauren's, discovered was almost right next door to it. We weren't even aware that there had been a black lodge in that part of Wallville, but indeed there had. Some of you saw the sword at the back of the room, which Lauren has brought with her today from the park. Anyway, we're also aware that there were white neighbors in Wallville who would attend events or musical events, especially larger social events, at least close enough to hear the music that was happening on those special events at St. Luke's. When there were baptisms, the preacher from St. Luke's would conduct those down on the Lawrence Gross property. I see nods in the back of the room. So any of those stories, anything you can expand on that for us would be most helpful. Thank you.
So I'm going to invite Lauren up here to talk briefly about the history of the Knights of Pythias, or Pythias, I'm not even sure how you pronounce it. But the Knights of Pythias of Chitron Neck was founded in 1910, and it existed at least until 1936, when the lodge members decided to disband and sell the property, which they ultimately did in 1937. So Lauren, if you could come up here and talk about the history of the Knights and also about the sword.
Hello, everybody. So the Knights of Pythias, I think I heard Pythias at some point from somebody. They were founded in 1864 in Washington, D.C. It was originally started as a white fraternal organization. From the beginning, black men were petitioning to join this organization. However, they were rejected at pretty much every turn. But in order to create their own fraternal organization, but black men who could pass for white joined the Knights of Pythias, took their rules, regulations, and secrets and created their own organization under the Knights of Pythias name, called and this is kind of long, so I have to read it, the Knights of Pythias of North and South America, Europe, Asia, Africa, and Australia. It was formed in Vicksburg, Mississippi in 1880. Scott spoke a little bit about how our Wallville branch was started in 1910. I have some names here from Trisha's research. Trustees for the organization and land purchase were prominent Wallville community members William Gross, Joseph Barragas, and Alexander Gross. And in 1936, the Knights of the Lone Star No. 26 Lodge voted to disband and sell the property to Leona Bowles. And we think that one reason why they decided to disband in 1936 was the Great Depression. People were focused on survival, putting their money towards survival, so things like fraternal organizations were often disbanded.
where we, as Kirsty mentioned, the Knights of Pythias Lodge was located directly north of St. Luke's Church, and here are kind of deed plots for those two land parcels. The larger one is St. Luke's Church, and the smaller one to the north, that's the Knights of Pythias Lodge. And because I like looking at weird maps, I also pulled up the topography LiDAR map, and you can even see the support piers for St. Luke's Church. They still appear on these like high-resolution topography maps. And these might represent where some of the graves are in the cemetery, not entirely sure. And we're wondering if this might be some remains of where that lodge was. So I'm going to turn it back over to Tricia.
So we think that Walter Bowman, who I think is, Ron's your grandfather, right? Is the person that found and donated the sword to the park. If you remember anything about that, or if your dad remembers anything about that, we would love to hear that. We also are interested if anybody knows if the graves that were at the church were moved up to Brooks, if anybody has any knowledge of anything like that, or the location of where, or even if there was a cemetery at St. Luke's Church. We don't know for sure. So we are interested in all of that. So we have been doing lots of archival research. I talked about some of the sources that we were using before. I'll just go pretty quickly. We have lots of oral histories. One by Minnie Octavia Brown is this little section here, talks about her time and her memories of St. Luke's Church. We also have been looking at newspaper articles. This is one from the Calvert Independent for a birthday party for the oldest member of the church in 1951. And of course, I can't read it from there. George Gross was 81 in 1951. And it lists the presents that he got and the food that they had. We also looked at a book at the Maryland State Archives on oyster tongers licenses, and we're still kind of assessing this, but you can see they had it divided by whether it was white or black men, and I didn't see any women at all, maybe one woman whose name was listed. By the years, and you can see as between 1906 and 1913, the number of people actually getting oyster tongers license went down. We did some looking at the oldest and the youngest because their ages were listed. So there may be some interesting things that can come out of this tongers license book. I've also, with the steering committee's permission, have been doing a deep dive into ancestry, trying to put together some Gross family trees, and I've been reaching out to people who have been doing their own trees online, and I've been corresponding with some folks. So I'm looking into not all of the families yet, but some of the white and the black families there, and it's like a rabbit hole I don't want to get out of. I just like want to stay at home all weekend long and just play with ancestry and finding out some really incredible stuff. Okay, back to Scott. We're almost done, guys.
So where we first encountered that Knights of Pythias record was through a 1911 through 1916 tax assessment book. And the tax assessment books give you a lot of information. The 1911 through 1916 was particularly detailed because it would list, with each person, it would say where they lived. So we would know everyone in District 1 of Calvert County, which also includes like Lesby and Solomons. We could tell which ones were from Wallville and which ones weren't. So we're entering that all into a database. And things that were taxable were things like your land, your improvements like your house, your furniture until 1915 when they decided to pass a law that you couldn't tax people on their furniture, and then also transportation, things like cars and buggies and boats, and also your livestock was also taxable. And so it gives you an idea of kind of the economic demographics of the Wallville community. And we're still entering in a lot of this data, and we're going to try to find some trends where we can. We've also gone through the Maryland Inventory of Historic Properties. I know some of you have mentioned that to me already this morning. We haven't plotted them all out onto our map yet, but we plan on incorporating those into our interpretations of the larger community. As far as some of the properties that we've been looking at in the Wallville community, some of the larger farms like the Point Farm or Peterson Farm, where Jefferson Patterson Park is now, it was purchased by the Pattersons, as Tricia mentioned, in the 1930s, where they kind of converted it from a working farm to more of like a country retreat, while still maintaining that there were tenants working and living on the property. Where Wallville gets its name is from the Wall family, and they operated a post office until around the 1860s, 1870s. They also had a general store and a school somewhere on their property. And that post office was in use until Makel's Wharf Post Office was established around 1870. And Makel's Wharf also included an 18th century house called Brew House. And again, by the 1870s, it was operating a post office by the Makel family, which was in use until 1956. At the wharf, steamboats would go there, and there was an advertisement from the Weems Steamboat Company that advertised Makel's Wharf as being a location for saltwater bathing, crabbing, fishing, and boating. So we're taking all of this kind of information, this broad history, and incorporating it into the civil rights aspect of the National Park Service grant. So moving forward, Tricia's going to give you kind of an overview of our project timeline and deliverables, and then we'll kind of split off and talk about some of these maps.
Right, I need better eyes to be able to see that. So our documentary research is going to be ongoing for this project. We have steering committee meetings once a month to help keep us on track. We plan to do about 4 weeks of archaeological field work this spring. If any of you want to come out, it's in the woods, so just be aware. But if anybody wants to come out and see it, you are more than welcome. We will have another one of these meetings probably sometime in the late summer to update you on the archaeology and what else we found out about the project. We will be doing processing of the artifacts. If anybody wants to come and see any of those artifacts, you can certainly come to the Maryland Archaeological Conservation Lab. Just email me. Then we will be doing site interpretation materials from the kind of the May through July, and at some point by the end of the grant, which is in October, we will have all of those interpretive materials prepared and ready to go out to the public. And what those deliverables will be, we will have 2 interpretive outdoor signs on the park. We are going to do a web page about the Wallville community. We are going to do a public-facing booklet about the Wallville community. That's going to be freely available to everybody. We're going to give copies to the libraries, the historical societies. We're going to give out copies at our public events like Children's Day, and then the Community Day that is sponsored by the NAACP. And then we will do a more technical report, an archaeological report of what we find, and then a grant report for the Park Service that will be very detailed. But we see this as ongoing. Our director, Rod Cofield, is very excited about the project, and we were going to do a wall in our 1932 exhibit barn, on the Wallville community, and he said, listen, we're going to take down the War of 1812 exhibit, and that's in a huge space, a little enclosed area that's probably 5 times bigger than what we were planning on doing. And he said, let's do that space instead. So it's already been cleaned out. I think they're getting ready to paint and prime it, ready for us to fill it with information and photographs and things like that. So, and videotapes and audio tapes. So we're very, very excited about that. And we are seeking additional funding because, again, the money from the park service is great, but it's only going to go so far. So we are looking for more funding. So for your input, if you guys would like to help us, anybody that you know of that could potentially be happy to do an oral history. I heard recently about a 99-year-old gentleman who might be, hopefully, somebody who would like to be a candidate for an oral history. We have these maps up here that we have stickers to mark places of interest on the landscape, and we're here to take notes on those. Any kind of family histories that you want to share, any sort of photographs that we could scan and use, anything. And again, tell us what you're interested in us finding out through this project, and we will do our best to accommodate you. The last slide?
Yep.
All right. So now it's y'all's turn to say what you like, or ask us questions, or share information, and we have a microphone. And I guess if we could have people raise their hands, there's a lot of us here in this room, and maybe a lot of people want to talk, so if you could state your name, stand if you're able, we'll raise your hand, we'll bring the microphone to you, and then say what you want to say, and try to keep it as brief as possible, because we only have this room until, what, 12:30 or so? All right, thank you. Anybody? Oh, wait a minute, Roxy, we want to do...
Door prize, okay.
Okay, let's do a door prize. She's going to choose a number, a ticket. I forgot about the door prizes, sorry.
The last 3 numbers is 759.
Then let's do one more, and then we'll go with questions.
Come on. 761. Lord. 764. You're welcome. This is good. 754. 763. You're welcome.
Does anybody have anything they want to say, they want to share, or questions they want to ask about the project? Yes, ma'am.
I just want to say that I am Della Robbins' granddaughter that lived one of the spots that you're talking about.
One of the Gross or the Rollins?
Rollins.
Rollins. Christine Gray?
Correct.
Thank you.
Washington.
Oh, you're in Washington? Washington. All right, I am really interested in the Washington family too. So yeah, they were an important family in Wallville. Thank you.
Can I just say, for anybody who's interested in talking with Patricia or being interviewed by Kirsty, before you leave, if you could come by and sign your name and your information, and do you have cards available?
I do. I have business cards on the back table.
And I will give you one of Patricia's business cards as well.
We also have some copies of the grant proposal if people want more information. There's a few copies, and if they run out, then you can just email me and I will be happy to send you a copy of that proposal.
I believe one of the spots that remains is that we're gonna do the field work on, just her grandmother's house.
And, okay,
That was, they call it Ranjini, it was Della Rollins and it's back on the Rollins Road. And, she spent a lot of time there.
all right, we want to do an oral history with you. Does that sound good? All right. Excellent.
Okay. Hello, what I want to know is, before Suki's cabin, like, where exactly did we come from? Because I'm totally born here, you know, originally from Calvert County. And so I would like to know, actually, like, how did Suki get here and her origins outside of the U.S.? So that's something I would. And, okay.
So, Kirsty, I don't know if you want to come and add to what I'm going to say or not, but what I suspect, based on Kirsty's research, is that Suki and her family were enslaved by the Pattersons. And after the Civil War was over, they stayed around the farm where they had been enslaved before and purchased property and sometimes rented farms. So they were either purchasing small tracts of land to farm, or they were renting from the people that they were working for at that point in time.
So, right, so I'm kind of, okay, this way. I'm Randy Parker, and I'm the daughter of Mervyn Parker. Well, he's one of the people, my cousins here. And actually, my grandmother was Amy Olivia Gross Parker, and her mother was Eliza Dawkins Gross, and Eliza's mother was Jane Dawkins, and Jane Dawkins' mother name was Sibette. And so Suki is like my fourth grandmother up, so it's very interesting to me. But before my father had passed, he had actually taken the ancestry DNA test, where a lot of our families, like Tanya and Cousin Christina there, we all connected, you know, on the Gross side, where the Washington and Gross, you know, as well, also from Wallville. So I'm really interested, because I actually had a lady that, I did not take the test, but my father did before he passed. And I had a lady that was Caucasian, and she was like, hey guys, and she was on Ancestry, because it's my father, the company, we never used a computer, so my sister and I used it, and so the lady was like 100% white, and she showed up as a close relative of my father, kind of weird, on the Grove side. So I just know that it's more than just Wallville in the U.S. So we had different countries like England, and so I was just curious, you know, how far back.
But if you remember from your dad, the family originated in England and was white.
Well, I guess my mother answered my question.
So,
Yeah, that's what I want to know. And one more thing about the chitterling neck, because I graduated from high school 25 years ago, and some of my cousins, which is Tanya's cousin and cousin Christina's nephew, they will always say chilling neck, not chitterling neck.
Right.
So they will always say chilling neck. And I was like, what is chilling neck? Not chitterling neck, but it's the same area on Wallville. And my cousin Terrence, since I passed away, he graduated with me. And he would always say chilling neck, him and some other people. And it was the area, I guess they lived in the Wallville. But I never knew what that meant, but I'm almost sure that it ties in with the chitterling and chitron. They would say chilling neck. So.
That's interesting. So these names get changed, you know, throughout time, and I don't know what the first name was. Was it Chitron or, you know, Chili Neck? Yeah, that's interesting. Okay.
hi, I'm Eliza Gross, granddaughter. My mother's Octavia. This is my brother, Shelton. Yeah. And we attended St. Louis Church. My Sunday school teacher was my Aunt Evelyn Gross, married to Alfred Gross. So that's all I have to say.
Put the mic to his.
Yeah, Aunt Evelyn was mine. You're older than I am. But
Anyone else? Oh, sorry.
hello, everyone. Yes, my name is Glenda Walls. My mother was Pauline Gross, daughter of Eliza Gross. And her sister, which was, her name was Aunt Mag, she attended St. Luke's Church. And I remember when I was real young, the preacher wanted to take all the alcohol out of the beer joints, in the area. And the whole church agreed. So they decided they were going to do that, and as they left, the preacher asked someone to come up with a song. And my Aunt Mag participated, and her song was, "Shall We Gather at the River?"
yes, yes.
And that joke, went through the family for a long time. I mean, it's not a joke, but it was kind of humorous to us to hear that. And my Uncle Daniel, which is Beverly's, my cousin Beverly's father, he spoke about it a lot to keep us laughing, And Aunt Mag is the only one I can really remember, besides the Aunt Lane, attending St. Luke's Church. Thank you.
So some of the steering committee members told us that there was a social club down on the water, and so hopefully somebody can come up and put a little sticker on the map that shows us exactly where that was. And I hear there's photographs of it someplace. All right, we'd love to see those photos of that social club. Apparently you could get a crab sandwich, you could go swimming, there was a beach there.
That was my grandmother's property.
Yeah.
Uncle Lawrence.
Yeah, Uncle Lawrence.
I would like to say something.
All right, you've got a microphone coming your way.
During the summer months, people didn't have nowhere to go. All the people from the city would come down to Lawrence Groves, and he would have activities like had music. He also sold food, and people had the opportunity to walk in the water to view the spot. And that was the place that black people had to go for events and other things. And meeting party was happy. It was just wonderful thing. And Mr. Gross didn't make money off selling food. Oh, and he sold fish too.
Anybody else?
And I also remember at St. Luke's Church when it's time to be baptized, they went to grandmama's property. Grandmama's property. And the teenage boys loved it when they dunked those women in the water.
So do we know, is that why it was called Dunker's Cove? Because that's where people went to get baptized.
People there.
I mean, anyway, if anybody knows anything about that, that would be.
I mentioned in the introductions, I'm Andre Brown, the grandson of Nellie Gross Brown. I'll just share a quick story. You were talking about the Lawrence Gross. We used to come down, I grew up in Baltimore, and Grandma Nellie used to bring us down every summer, and we would spend time at Uncle Lawrence's place. And I remember coming one time and we saw a car. If you recall, there was like a cliff like down to the water, and we saw a car halfway over the cliff stuck in the tree. And of course we wanted to know how did that happen. Well, she proceeded to tell us stories about Uncle Lawrence and one of his brothers, and how they would, the alcohol that came from the church will evidently have found its way to Uncle Lawrence's place. And they would drink all the time and then drive home. And she said one time they got in the car after one of these sessions, but they got in the back seat of the car. And he said, Lawrence, someone broke in your car and stole your steering wheel. And she said, and he looked down on the floor and he said, you know, they done stole the brakes too. The good thing was they survived that night, because had they gotten in the front seat, we know that they could have both killed themselves. So these were just some of the stories that we heard about Uncle Lawrence and that whole property and their episodes. I just thought I would throw that one out.
That's a great story.
My name is Chester Gross. I'm going to share this bit of information with you, and I cannot back it up by paperwork, so it's all history. And it's coming from my mother, and I have no doubt about her intellect or her word. But at any rate, we're going to the property located there on St. Leonard's Creek, in which my grandmother and James, her husband, James Everett Jr., obtained. And from what I was told, that he obtained this property through an auction. And that was how he obtained the property. And also, there were, as some of my cousins stated, the place was like, it was like a getaway vacation, especially for young folks during a school break. And also, they were have people coming from different areas further away, like Baltimore, Annapolis, and it was like I guess you could say it was a recreation area for black people to come and have fun during the summer months and whenever they could.
So we know that there were a bunch of stores. We've heard Gott's store, Hardesty store. There may be some additional stores. We know there was a white school. That school is still standing, and it looks like it's being turned into a wine tasting room for the new Wallville Vineyard. And then we know that there were two locations for the Black Wallville School on Lloyd Bowen Road. And we just recently found out that there was a teacherage for the teacher that taught at the Black Wallville School as well. So there's all sorts of stuff. I think there was another social club, wasn't there, Scott? Kind of up near Perrin on the left as you're heading towards Prince Frederick. Is that right? Like a Sunday school or another? Chitron Neck Mission. So there's all sorts of stuff that we're finding out in records, and we hope to find out even more.
Yes, ma'am. I live across from the house that used to be a Hardesty store on Nickel Road. When I built my home, it was just a wooded area. And I brought my mom down to show her where I was building. She showed me my backyard. It's an old driveway. She told me that was her driveway growing up. I had no idea I was purchasing property that my family had lived on, that the house had burned down when she was a kid. Year after year on my property, we're digging up so much glass. It's an old chimney, but because we were across from that store, I think people threw their garbage where I live. And I'm talking hundreds and hundreds of old bottles are still there. And if you're looking for some old stuff, every year as it rains, it comes out of the ground and we clean it up. So I don't know if you guys have any interest in that type of stuff. It's garbage for me.
So what I have to tell you, archaeologists do like their garbage, right? People throw stuff away, and we love it because it helps tell us about the past. there were no garbage trucks during that time period, and so people took the path of least resistance, right? They threw garbage, the easiest place that was like out of sight and out of mind. If you want to bring some of those bottles, or we could come to your house and look, I can date those for you in any kind of pottery or something that you have. So.
The house where I live, it was a neighborhood barber house, her name was Webb Aaron. Aaron. And so a lot of the men were there getting their
Haircut. So there was a barber as well.
Yeah, so I think it's his chimney that was in my yard.
Okay.
Plus it was across from house store.
Okay.
And then I don't know, because I was a child, but if they sold alcohol in that store for the store or not, you know. So that's, okay, just the old.
We could tell if there's alcohol bottles. We know the difference between that and other kinds.
The
first Coca-Cola bottle that I ever seen, you know, all of that kind of stuff.
All right, well, come up and put some stickers on the map afterwards. So. Anybody else? Well, if you don't feel comfortable speaking in front of folks, please approach one of folks with these name tags on. And then I guess what we can do is then just circulate. The board in the back has got names. If you don't see a name that you think that should be on there, please add it. I think there's some dry erase markers on the table. We do have oral history and other kinds of informational sign-ups, so please sign up and come up and share stories and mark places on this map that are important to you and your family. And again, anybody that signs up and has put an email address in, we can keep you in the loop. I've got a spreadsheet of people that are interested in the project that I will be sending information as we continue to work on this study. Thank y'all so much for coming today. This is overwhelming. I am more excited about this project than I have been about anything in the last decade. So thank you. This is so gratifying to see all of you here today. Thank you so much for coming. Please have some food. Good people back here. Go see the Knights of Pythia's sword. Thank you so much.